Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Mentor Me panel. Today we have with us Tanvi.
Thank you so much, Shaila, for having me here. So a little bit about me. I'm Tanvi. Great to meet everyone. I graduated TISB 7 years ago now, so 2013. And that was the best Vivum ever, guys. If anyone ever says otherwise, it's not true. Anyway, so I graduated TISB with um, plans to study biology, and I went on to McGill um, in the biology and computer science dual degree program. And at the time, I was like very confident that biology is kind of what I wanted to do. I was very stubborn about it, and I was like, nope, this is what I want to do. I want to get into biotechnology, and that's my calling. And oh God, how wrong I was. So I think like once I did go into college and did started to take the biology classes, it wasn't me. I think a lot of it just didn't interest me. It just and studying is a lot about, in my experience and opinion, a lot about what interests you. It's really important. That's the only way you'll learn. So it's not just about grades and not just about getting stuff done, but it is really important that you learn, you grow, you become something by what you're being taught. And that just wasn't happening for me. And I never thought I would ever do computer science, to be honest. Like, if you told me in school I'm going to do computer science, I would have been like, you guys are crazy. Like, there's no way. Um, but I really enjoyed those classes, like in college, and it just felt right, and it felt like I was learning so much, and my mind was just working in a way it's never worked before. And I did do computer science very briefly in school, but still, this was very different. Um, and oh boy, that was also another roller coaster. So I decided to do computer science. I decided to do theoretical computer science. It was more math and logic, not so much coding and development as the way most of us kind of know about computer science in the outside world. So once I finished college, I kind of, or towards the last 3 semesters of college, I was kind of very certain that I wanted to be in technology. I wanted to work in tech, but I didn't want to do CS. I didn't want to build the program. It didn't interest me. It didn't excite me at all. And a big part of me that wasn't being used was a very creative side, which I always had. Not artistic, but more about thinking out of the box, thinking to build something that can wow, to kind of also touch people, right? At the time when I studied, there was no concept of user experience design. You didn't really hear about it, you didn't talk about it. Um, but I kind of like, while in computer science, you did these hackathons, you kind of did all these projects where the interface became a very integral part of actually helping people understand your technology. And that kind of bridged the gap for me, where I realized, okay, I want to be in tech. I want to kind of build something, but I want to use my creativity and apply my logical sense and my logical abilities, because that's kind of what I studied. So user experience design, not as a career, not as a title, but it just happened. Like, I think the most important lesson for me at the time was, and today something I would obviously tell anybody I meet, is just keep an open mind. It's really, really important. You're not supposed to know what you want to do when you go to college. You're not supposed to know what you want to do when you leave college either. I have so many friends even today, and we're like, what, 25, 26, and we're still figuring it out, and that's completely fair. So as long as you kind of have an open mind, I think opportunities come to you instead of you going and looking for them. And that's kind of when you discover not only what you want to do, but who you are, what you want to learn, and what you're good at. I've worked now for about 3 years. Of course, from the first day that you start working to where I am today, it's a completely stark difference, and that's perfectly fine. My first job, my first time ever in an office or in a corporate environment was at Microsoft. I did my internship with them, and it was very different, right? Like in college, you're in the grind, or even in TISP, I remember like the IB was a lot of work. You were constantly working. Come Microsoft, and everything was chilled. Everyone was like laid back. Everyone was like, it was like, in those movies how they like project Silicon Valley. It was like that. People were playing video games, and so I didn't fully understand how do you balance that. I mean, does this mean that there's no work? No, obviously not. But people learned how to balance that, and I was like 21, 22, and for me, it was like, wow, this is amazing. Um, and that was my first ever corporate experience, right? 4 months, I did nothing. I partied. I barely made it to office, and it was all fine. Like everyone was like, oh, this is so normal. And I was like, okay. Come my first job, and everything changed. Like now you're getting paid, right? Like you have this concept of responsibility. So days and my first job was at Paytm. I was a UX, both Microsoft, Paytm, and now Postman. At all times I've been a user experience designer. um, but at Paytm you realize that now you kind of have a role to play in making the company grow. In like there's so much more responsibility. Plus Paytm at the time was a startup. Like it was literally just booming in India, 2017. So there was a lot of work happening. It was super quick, super fast. So a typical day would essentially start by about like 9:30 or so, 9:30 or 10 o'clock in the morning, and you would go on till work went on. So on an average my work would end not before 7:38. um, and the nice thing about office at the time was, there was a lot to kind of learn from the industry. So now you have this education, right, which is taught to you. I was now figuring out, how do you learn, how do you grow when somebody's not explicitly teaching you. So a lot of my day also did go on focusing on that part, that I knew I came with no education in this particular field. I knew I came with very limited knowledge about what this field has to offer. And therefore, I had to work doubly hard versus somebody who did come from this a design education, a design background, or even not just an education, but even from another job where they were a designer already. And that's what a fresher, if you've heard the term, means. So I think the first job that you ever do, and my advice on that front would be, focus on how to learn when you're not being taught. It's very important. It makes you stand out. It makes you grow. It makes your work better, your output better, your result better. And at that age, it's really important. Like if you stop learning at that age and you stop focusing on that, you'll get stunted like at a very early age, I would say. Today at Postman, I'm a manager. I handle 5 designers under me. um, and more or less the same in terms of work. You still do work on projects, you still do work on things that are going live, but there is a newer aspect of a role and responsibility where now you are responsible for the output and delivery of other individuals. So that's new, that's different, and therefore a lot of my day to day also goes into ensuring that the output that my team is um, kind of pushing out there is of a certain caliber as expected by our stakeholders, our users, our consumers. Yeah. Like I said, when I went into college, I was really stubborn. I was doing really well in my IB biology. It was my seventh subject. So I was very certain that this is kind of what I want to do. Computer science had a lot of math, and I never enjoyed math, and I was never good at it. So in my head, I was like, no, no, CS is not going to happen. When McGill actually accepted my application, they put me into biology and computer science as a department. So it's I think these transitions in college don't really happen because like you have an epiphany, or you start, or at least with me, I'm sure it happens with some people. With me, it didn't. It wasn't like an epiphany. It's just that I knew biology wasn't for me. I wasn't doing well in the classes, no matter how much I studied or put in the work, the results were not coming. And that itself is a sign. I was always stressed. I was always unhappy, essentially. And Not that computer science was like my first choice. I would have actually maybe ended up doing economics or something like that, if I had the choice to move. McGill as a school is very rigid in its structure. It's kind of like the UK. So once you get into a particular school in the college, you actually can't change schools very easily. So because I was in the school of biology and computer science, my options were limited. And or it wasn't biology and computer science, it was like something like physical sciences or something like that. I don't know. There were two schools in science, which were, one was this physical sciences, one was biomedical. So I was in this physical sciences. And when So what I did do actually was, once you're gonna get a hang of how your college works, how courses work, um, so every course will have a description, which you can kind of go through. Once you kind of understand how courses work, those descriptions also start seeming a little less vague, essentially. So when I did make the decision to transition from biology to computer science, one thing I did do was go through the courses that computer science as a school has to offer, be it from like first year of college to fourth year of college. Um, and I saw a lot of them. Like, obviously, I didn't know how hard they were, how easy they were, or whatever. But I saw a lot of them that really interested me, and a lot of them that like I wanted to learn. Like, I wanted to know how to do some of it. So I just went with that gut. Um, and even if you so now if like as a degree I have computer science, as courses I did math. Like it was kind of like a mix. I just went with it. There was a lot of gut feeling. So it wasn't like a very mentally sound, like I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. I was very, very open. Like my mind was all like, because I'd learned that stubbornness from college, school to college, where I was like, no, I wanted biology, was a huge mistake I'd made. um I think then once I settled in, so the first 2 years do take a little bit of settling in, at least for me, they did. Towards my third year is really when I started to explore clubs. I started to explore extracurriculars, not related to, I was very clear that I didn't want to do anything related to what I've already done. I was also very interested in fashion, in like style, essentially, not design. Design for me was art, and I sucked at art. I almost failed eighth grade in TIS because I failed art class. um, Not failed eighth grade, but like I almost failed art class. But design never occurred to me. And then through these clubs, I kind of discovered a charity fashion. It was called Synesthesia. They hosted a fashion show which was for charities for Asia. So I kind of worked with them, and I worked on their communications and marketing department. And that was the first time I kind of got this experience to work with people people who are like clients, essentially. And I really realized that I also need to be in a place in my life where I'm interacting with people. Like, that's kind of when I decided software development wasn't for me, because that's very silo and it's very individual. um, I needed to do something which involved people, because that's something I was really good at. And that came from clubs. So I would definitely say join a club. It doesn't have to, don't do it for your resume because it makes no difference. It's all about experience. It's who do you become? How do you grow from that experience? And what skills do you develop? Soft skills, hard skills, doesn't matter. That's kind of what a club gives you. So a lot of people get stuck in this, will it look good on my resume? Do things out of interest, guys. It's okay. It's okay to have a hobby. It's okay to be interested in something. And honestly, today, as I hire and as I recruit people, it's one of my first questions in an interview. Like, if you don't have a hobby and interest, you're not in. I don't know. There's something off. You're not human. Then I think. Um, so that was kind of more the transition. Like it was not a very calculated decision at any point. And like I said, design itself fell on my lap in a very unexpected. I wasn't sure for a very long time. I contemplated, do I want to do marketing because it involves people, but I wanted to be in tech. So there was some kind of like discovery. There was some kind of like keeping your eyes and ears open, um, to what all is there out there. And I didn't even know what UX meant till I joined Microsoft for my internship. So um, yeah, I don't think it was very rigid in my experience, honestly. I've asked myself this, and that's such a great question because it's a question I've asked myself that if I had to go back today and do my college applications all over again, how would I do it? And I think the most important is what something all of us, I think most of my friends, most of us did very wrong was we chased the name versus the type of school. Understanding it's not about what you end up studying, it's not about what degree you have. Like everyone gets a job, everyone figures it out, right? um, when you do choose, and I can't say, yes, Canada, UK are very rigid. I don't know if I have the best advice to tell you what major to choose, because technically it would be great in an ideal situation you shouldn't choose your major till your third year because technically you're not supposed to know, right? So you do kind of a liberal arts program and you get to the major when you figure it out. Which honestly, in my experience, to whatever rigidity I did have, I did that a little bit. Like I mixed and matched and figured it out. And McGill allowed me to do that within the constraint that you had to be in science, you had to be in physical science. Um, but what I would say is pick a school that resonates with who you are. And schools also have a typical type, a personality that attracts them. So just because Stanford is a great school doesn't mean Stanford is a great school for you. And I think they're two very, very different statements. So when you do pick schools, most importantly, pick schools that resonate with who you are and who you are as an individual. If you like sports, pick a school that allows you to play the sport, right? If you like music, pick a school where there's an opportunity for you to pursue music as a hobby. Do and eventually it will kind of like come together where if you're happy doing something and the school provides you with that opportunity to do it, you will in turn study better and everything will just happen better, right? Mental health eventually relates to everything. um, and so I would definitely say focus on, when you're making that list, especially focus a lot on what is that school, who does that school represent, and do you fit that culture? Do you fit that kind of, if you're geeky, do you fit it? If you're like, if you like to party, do you fit it? Like there's so many things that are just like different things that a person would want to do. And it's okay to want to be all of those things, right? You should worship that and honor that. um, Picking a major, I think, is a much harder question. I don't think that's the right way. That is a little, be okay to experiment, be okay to do the trial and error. It's okay to fail, it's okay to not do well. Um, that's the only way you'll know this is not making me happy. So don't let it get to you at this early a stage. It says, no point, honestly. I feel like my answer is going to be so different. I'm scared.
No, tell me.
Okay, so for me, TISB was, what it really taught me, to be completely honest with you, is relationship with people, friendship, teachers, your seniors, your juniors, working together, being a team. I always felt like TISB had a lot of pride. There was a lot of pride in when we said we go to TISB. There was a lot of school spirit. I was really into sports through all of school. It was a big part of my life. Most of my bestest friends were also into sports, and I think that was very instilled in us, right? Everything's about teamwork. It's not all about, you have to shine individually, but if your team fails, you shining individually doesn't matter. Um, and just maintaining that relationship, sport, like every sport that we played, be it soccer, basketball, even something as individualistic as field sports, um, all of us always knew that at the end of the day, it's not about my name, it's about TISB's name. And that was very instilled in us. We had a lot of pride about our school. And I think that's a big, big takeaway for me. It's a fact. It's made me choose my career, to be honest. Like I said, I'm a people's person and I need to be around people. And this is something I realized and nurtured when I was in TISB. Plus, I did go to boarding school also in TISB. I was in boarding from 7th to 10th. So it's like, for 4 years, 3.5 years, they were my family, literally. And I think those parts of TI, of course, the work ethic, the rigorousness, I think there's a lot of pressure at TISB, so it really teaches you how to deal with pressure. Um, all of that is there, but this is a huge takeaway from me. And if I had to change schools, I don't think I ever would be able to, just because I don't think any other school, no one I've ever met from another school, to be really honest, feels or behaves the same way, or reacts to situations the same way, or deals with people the same way. And that's something TISV taught me, at least.
I completely agree. Like, I think community is something that's I think only like a lot of people really recognize it in hindsight, but then everybody is always like, oh, like my friends, like I don't have that close of a bond with them as I do with my friends from TISB and stuff like that. I hear it with people who have graduated 1 year ago. I hear people who graduated 5 years ago. So I think it's
Oh
really,
yeah,
yeah, the same like across the board.
most of my closest friends today are people I've known since I was 12 years old. So that's, holy shit, like
Yeah,
13 years.
yeah,
And we're still the same, like it's the same. So TISB really, really does that. And I think that's a very important, people skills are extremely important no matter what you do.
definitely,
um, and that's something that most people who come out of TISB have.
definitely.
So I think this is like something a lot of people find curious also. They don't fully understand why you would get an education there, and not want to stay there. I think, even before I, completely honest, even before I did go there for an education, I never wanted to live there. I've been going there all my life. My part of my family lives there. And it's great for vacation. For me, it was great for vacation, great for holidaying. I just never saw myself living there. Multiple personal reasons for that, way of living, the style of living, the social culture. I mean, there's so many things. The culture, just not just social, just the culture. Um, India for me was very comfortable, and I like being comfortable. Yeah, so before going itself, I was very like open to the idea that I wanted to come back. I mean, that I would come back, and that's perfectly fine by me. At the time, it was a little scary, just because, for like I said, I went into the biology. I didn't know how much opportunity India would have for me in terms of that, right? But then towards the end of my college career, I was kind of certain that, you know what, it would be nice to go back home. I just wanted to be home. It would be nice to be closer to family. I've spent so many years of my life away from them that I was at a point where I wanted to come back. Um, and because I chose to be in tech, India was an open field for me. There was just so much happening, and still today there's so much happening in technology, that it was never a fear that I won't have a good job, I won't have a good experience. I need America or a Western world to give me that experience. And there are certain jobs that I totally understand. You need that. For me, fortunately, India was not uh, fulfilling that criteria, like, making me feel like it's going to hinder with my career. Um, and very proudly, I've only so far worked for Indian companies, like Paytm's Indian, Postman's based in San Francisco, but founded by three Indian guys. And I think there's a lot of innovation, a lot of new stuff happening in India. It's an emerging market. There's a lot of opportunity, and you're close to home. It's comfortable, to be honest. So I think it's a very personal decision. Completely, there was no other way to put it.
I think it's definitely something that like I would say even today is very underrated. It's like I know like a lot of my batchmates like I think there's a lot of talk about like, oh, why should I stay in the U.S.? Why should I stay? But there's no like talk about like why not India, right? Like the question is like I think that's a different conversation that also should be started. Is like why not come back to India? And I'm personally really interested in biology and in global health, and I've always like I don't want to come back to India. I've always been a bit worried about like the job market and the job opportunities that are there in India, but like you said, it's such an emerging field, and that's technology, but that's also in so many other areas that I think like if you're talking to somebody who like maybe made the decision 20 years ago and who made the decision like a couple of years ago, their experiences are going to be very different, right? Because the market has just exploded over the last couple of years. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think very early on in my age, I stopped listening to my parents and my elderly people at home, because I was like, guys, there is a generation gap. uh, you saw an India or a world that um, none of us have actually ever seen, because when we saw it, we were toddlers. Today we see a very different world. So honestly, from my family, and I know a lot of people have this as well, a lot of families also do feel like if you go abroad, why not stay there for a few years, experience that. My family never had that. So personally, I never had that thought. And I always used to tell them as well that being in a different country may not necessarily give me the same opportunities. um, it's not a guarantee, essentially, so you should grab an opportunity. And I was never, borders of a country never came in the way of that. Obviously you're an Indian citizen, so getting an opportunity in India was much easier. It's as simple as that. um, and yeah, but I think the decision to stay, the decision to come back is very personal, and some people don't fully understand that. But you should just, as people, as contemporaries, we should really respect that. It's perfectly fine if you decide to stay. It's perfectly fine. I mean, there's no like
No,
good
no,
way,
wrong. Yeah,
bad way
definitely,
about it. Yeah.
definitely, definitely.
Pros of a startup, I think, are definitely um, the fact that you're not so okay. So at a Microsoft, for example, it's very hierarchical. And because it's very structured, an organization, because it's old, right? And it's established. The problem with hierarchy is your exposure is kind of very cut off at a particular point. Work moves in a certain progression, and when it moves in that particular progression, at each level that it progresses, you're kind of cut off from the exposure to that particular thing. For example, um, I am doing the interaction design of something, someone is doing the visual design, and I might not even converse with that person, and that's very possible. um, Startups, more, not so much startups, I wouldn't just say startups, but more new age companies, I would say in the last decade or so, are breaking this hierarchy, right? So what happens with that is you're exposed to a lot more. And you're not broken, or you're not made to work just on a particular skill. You're made to work and explore multiple skills, be it from something like a soft skill, like your like the way you speak, the way you present yourself, your work, versus to actually the hard skills, like doing that particular work. Startup gives you that range, I think, and that's a huge pro, right? Um, it also allows you to diversify your career earlier on. So the earlier you work with a startup, the earlier you kind of have opportunities, because you have this range, opportunities to figure out, hey, from design I want to move to product management, I want to actually do product related things, I actually wanted to do growth, I mean, there's just so much opportunity. In a startup, because of that exposure, you get the opportunity to diversify much earlier on. Cons of it are like, I don't know if they're really cons anymore. Like, it's just becoming, I think it's going to be the future of the way we work. But it's a lot of context switching. Things are happening simultaneously. You have to be able to multitask. Things are happening very quickly. The demand is a lot more alive, and therefore feels a lot faster and feels a lot more real time. Um, so that's like more of a coping mechanism that you kind of have to get used to, which at established organizations like a Microsoft or a Google doesn't happen as much. It's more like toned down, calm. Just because there are also so many hierarchies that information trickles down from, that by the time it reaches you, it's like already very calmly reached you. At a startup, it's not so calm. But yeah, I mean, apart from that, I don't think there's a major difference, honestly, in my experience. Pretty much the same as the US. I think the way the school is structured is a little different. Like I said, it's more rigid. In America, America follows a very liberal program in the first 2 years of your college until you actually declare a major. Once you kind of declare a major, it's more or less the same. In Canada, you're essentially declaring a major very early on. So you're kind of deciding that, hey, this is what I want to do. This is how I want to go about doing it. Now, when you're in Canada, okay, so in Canada, every school is also a little different. I can only speak for McGill because I'm not really sure about University of Toronto, which is kind of similar. U of T is kind of similar, but I don't know about University of Ottawa, University of British Columbia. I'm not so sure. Um, but so McGill, for example, the three main schools, I guess the School of Arts, the School of Science, and the School of Business or Management. These are kind of the three schools you apply into. And then in these schools, you have faculties. So I was, oh no, sorry, the school is called the faculty, and then you have departments. So I was in the department of physical science, something, something, something. Then there was a department called biomedical sciences, and science was split into just two. Uh, Arts on the other hand had like a whole bunch of stuff, right? Like from psychology to literature to philosophy to economics to geography. I mean, there were lots of things. So arts worked a little differently. It was a little bit more fluid. You could move around a little bit more, just because arts as a subject, or as a subject area, is more fluid. It's more dynamic. Science in McGill, a research oriented school, very methodological, theoretical in its approach, and that's just how it is as a school. And they have one of the best science programs in Canada. So they take science at a very high caliber, and it's very competitive, I would say. And that's why it's a little more rigid. So they expect students who are coming into science to be of a certain um, level in terms of how they are as a student, especially. And arts, you'll see the difference majorly between a science student at a McGill versus an art student at a McGill. And so in terms of culture, just based on where you actually end up studying, your experience might be completely different from mine. Um, I spent a lot of hours working, right? Not gonna lie. I didn't have a lot of time to like go out and like party, and I couldn't do it. Like towards my last 2 years of college, I just didn't have the time. Um, but that's true for any science program anywhere in the world, to be honest. So if you go into science, you're gonna have to. If you go into engineering, it's even worse. Um, but you kind of choose that for yourself. The nice things about Canada is you don't have to live on campus all throughout. That's amazing because my best friend and I from college got an apartment together from second year all the way to fourth year, and it was just a lot of fun. Like you just adulted for most of it. Staying in dorm, you still feel like a kid. You have more restrictions. You don't have this space. You don't have this concept of building a home for yourself. And these parts of college experience are very important too. And especially socially, as you grow older, you take on more responsibility. um, and because McGill was a city school, we and at McGill you can drink at 18, so it was just very like it was like a city life kind of thing. Montreal's beautiful. um, it's very French, it's also very modern, and it's like a good balance of both. So that way we had like uh, more of a city experience. Imagine studying in a New York or a Boston, kind of the same. But it's a tough school. So you kind of had to understand that you are in a very rigorous program, and it's okay if um, people around you are doing all kinds of things and you can't. You just kind of have to accept it. It was hard, but yeah, I think not much difference honestly between the US and Canada in that sense. It's just that it's a little more rigid, especially in science. It's a little more structured. Arts is a little more fluid, to be honest. But I think it's also true for like any of these like specialized programs. So say you choose to do law, right? Again, like law will become rigid. Like what Canada essentially says is, hey, if you've decided to study law and you've applied for that, you better be sure that that's kind of what you want to do. Dropping out of that and changing it is a much bigger ask, basically. And I think it stems from the fact that when you got in, you kind of took a place of another candidate that could have potentially gotten in. So they don't encourage you to change out of specialized degrees, basically. Okay, so I think all my friends always tell me today that I've really had it all lucky in certain sense, that at the end of the day, what I physically do on a day-to-day basis is something that I absolutely love, right? So for me, when I'm actually doing it, it's beyond what like it's beyond just a job. I'm doing it because I'm really passionate about it. And I understand that most people in this world do not do a job that they're passionate about. So apart from that fortunate, um, you know, thing, I think definitely between my first job to where I am today, my first job, right? You kind of got what you, I mean, you took what you got. You didn't really, I didn't at least play like, oh no, I don't want this, I want that. I didn't do any of that. Paytm came, I took Paytm and I went for it. Um, and uh, there came a point with Paytm when I realized that I, as an individual, have stopped. Like now there's nowhere else for me to go within this company, with the product, with the people, with the culture, with lots of factors, right? And it hit me in about 2 years, at the end of 2 years, that now if I stay at Paytm, it's gonna negatively impact my skill, my personality as a career woman. um and that's kind of when I decided to quit. So um it was kind of ballsy. Like I quit without a job at hand, and I was just like, I just needed a break. I just wanted to figure it out, and that's perfectly fine. Like I really encourage that. Take a break. It's okay. Life doesn't have to be on full speed all the time. Um, but what happened with at Paytm, and when I realized and I quit and I took that time off, when I started applying for jobs again, I was very certain about what I was looking for. Um, I was very certain about what I was looking for in terms of culture. Culture is really, really, like I said, like culture, which school you go to, which workplace you work for, company you work for. At some point, it becomes very important. So my second job, when I started applying again in March this year, actually, um, it was like I was very certain about the kind of culture I was looking for. I wanted to look for a culture where ideas were kind of appreciated from any level. Hierarchy was not a problem. Things were like moving. And then, of course, the product itself, I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to do something different. Paytm was very generic just because of the product in itself. I mean, it had its challenges, but just in general. So the kind of positions that I started applying for were very narrow in thought. And this is the first time I'm making these decisions about, like, in my next career move, this is kind of what I want to do, this is what I want to achieve. um and yeah, so I think that's like, in terms of work life balance, not much has changed, to be honest. I feel like today at Postman I work harder in terms of number of hours than I did in Paytm, just because out here I do have to work US time sometimes. So um that's definitely there. But I feel less stressed here, to be honest. And I think that's a culture thing. That's a mentality, culture, kind of people you're working with, what you're working on, all of that. But this would not have been possible if Paytm hadn't happened. So I it would have been great if I knew that when I went into Paytm that, oh, this is not what I want, this is not the kind of company I want to work for, this is a company. But how do you know that till you experience it? So yeah, so I think like between my first job to where I am today, that was a major learning, at least, that I figure out what fits works better for me personally. Um, and I think the reason I cared about it so much was also because, like I said, physically, what I do is not a job for me. Everything else becomes the job, right? What I do, I enjoy doing. So I never feel that, oh my God, this is like, shit, I have to do this every day of my life. I don't really remember much about it, but what I do remember was um, I used my connections, right? Be it from family, be it from friends, be it from parents of my friends. Um, you used just to get the word out there, I think. And we should really appreciate the fact that we have that privilege, that we have this connection and we have this platform. And So I really honored that, worship that. Interview process, to be really honest, between when your first job to kind of later on in your career is a little different. The first job, the interview is more generic. It's more to kind of understand who you are, what you are doing. Skill is not something they're necessarily focusing on too much, because obviously you're just fresh out of college, you're not expected to have industry level skill. A lot of people convert from internships. Internships are very, very, very important. No matter which field you're in, make sure you're doing an internship, at least in your third year of college. Do something, work somewhere, anything, but like, um, ensure you have something solid. Most people actually convert their internships into full-time positions, between their third year into their graduating year. Um, Decision to come back to India, yeah, I think more or less it was made, before I even graduated school. So by the time I graduated school, I kind of already had Paytm. So um, it kind of just happened in the last semester. Someone just mentioned that, hey, Paytm's actually looking for designers. Would you be interested in joining? And then I went through a referral. I went through 3 rounds of interviews. um and yeah, so it was more like worshipping your connections, using them, to the best of your abilities. Internship, most important. Have some experience, do some stuff, work somewhere, work for somebody. It doesn't have to be a big company, big name. I don't I mean, I had that, I know, but still, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be a big name. And yeah, I think, also, to be really honest, I feel like from when I graduated school to now, um, companies have changed. People, the way that people approach has changed, and maybe that's something your generation, your batch, by the time you guys actually graduate school, it'll be really, really different, right? It'll be 10 years from when I graduated. Oh my god, that's old. But it'll be like 10 years from when I graduated school, altogether. So I just feel like, yeah, like, don't worry about having the perfect resume. It's not possible, you're not expected to. um but you can experiment as well, like figure out what you kind of want to do. Be open to opportunity, don't get stuck on a company, on a type of job. It's not worth it. But yeah, and worship your connections.
Yes.
So I am one of those who started applying and got a job in the middle of COVID. So, completely skewed, um, perspective on this probably. But I think, like, here's the thing with COVID, right? It's here. It's very real. It has impacted a lot of industries. There's no doubt about it. Um, but if, in my opinion, if it had impacted me, I would have probably figured out and done something on my own. Or I'd figure out something to do, some to make use of yourself, right? um I would really encourage you, as much as possible, and as horrible as it may sound, to not use COVID or a pandemic, the way that we're living in it right now, to become an excuse for you to not do anything. Um, there are lots of things for us to do. Maybe we'll go back to studying. Maybe we'll go back to building something from scratch. Maybe, there's lots of ways to keep yourself occupied. Um, my particular industry, technology, I mean, tech, has not probably been in fact affected by COVID to the extent that, um, you know, travel and, leisure activities and hospitality has been, affected, right? Or F&B. And yeah, so I don't think I've really felt the impact of it, but I knew, like, when I started applying, that in case it didn't work out, and there was a high probability that it wouldn't, that I would definitely try and do something with my time. And not try and not use the pandemic as an excuse to not do anything, because I feel like the pandemic's here to stay. It's going to be our new reality, unfortunately. So while it's okay to feel low, it's okay to have, days where you're mentally not there. um, don't let it become an excuse.
I completely agree. I think that's a fantastic way to end our interview.